Hey gamers, this is Ed Park aka Taugrim. Today we are looking at the Esper class in WildStar. It's an illusionist class that features a traditional combo point mechanic called Psi Points. You can use abilities to build up to 5 Psi Points and then use other abilities, finishers, that consume them. Here's my spec and you can see my gear. It's decent for my level but nothing special. I am running 3 pieces of PvP gear, which is very easy to acquire if you run battlegrounds. The Esper has a lot of flexibility in terms of how you can spec it, and one thing you'll notice here, I'm going ahead and trying to get to the initial flag spawn as quickly as possible using 2 dashes as well as sprint, and then just trying to find a good place to set up shop to start my telekinetic strike spam. So this is the ranged spammable attack that we have for building up combo points, and as soon as possible I pop my innate ability. The innate is a 5-second forced stealth route, which kind of sucks, but it does give you 5 combo points for 5 seconds, and it gives you an absorption bubble and an interrupt armor. So I'm taking damage here from this stalker. I go ahead and move out of his way, and he goes ahead and pulls back. One thing to note about telegraphs in this game, especially with regard to Z-axis, you can see this ramp here is slightly curved, is that if your targets are slightly above or below you in terms of elevation, sometimes your abilities will miss. So that I fired one mind burst a little bit ago and it seems to have missed the target, and the last one I kind of moved up closer to the center here to make sure I could tag the opponents with my mind burst. Mind burst is one of the finishers that we have. It is one of the highest direct damage that we have, abilities that we have. Scales really well with combo points, and the tier 8 of mind burst is fantastic. It actually gives you, when you use a 5-point combo finisher, a 5.5 second buff for a plus 15% crit chance. Alright, you'll notice as I'm moving to support this flag carrier, I'm not quite sure where I can sit down and turret, so I'm using Psychic Frenzy. That's the spammable melee combo point builder that we have. It also deals some decent damage, and I have both slotted on my bar. It's kind of funny because I know a lot of Espers favor either just sitting nuking from a range or doing melee. I've actually found, at least at low levels, it's really helpful to have both abilities slotted so that I have the flexibility of engaging from range, engaging in melee, or fighting on the run when I need to. The telekinetic strike, the big downside of it being this range spammer is that you have to be stationary in order to cast it, but that trade-off from a balance perspective makes sense. It hits pretty hard and it has really good range, so if we could use this on the run, there would have to be some other compensating nerf to balance that out, either reduce the damage or do something else. I get pulled in here, and immediately, as soon as I'm up, I end up strafing away from all this red telegraph hell. It's really important, and I have a few abilities that help me manage my survivability. One is Geist, which is the 2 ability that summons a pet that does damage over time, but more importantly, it provides you with a flat 15% damage mitigation while the pet is alive. I've also slotted on F Phantasmal Armor. That is a really nice instant cast bubble. It has a bit of a longish cooldown, but the nice thing about the absorption bubble is, all the damaging attacks that you get come in and have to burn through that bubble first before they get to your shields and your HP. It's really pretty nice under focus fire. Alright, and we're continuing to battle them out in the middle here. I go ahead and knock these targets down, get a nice 5-point mind burst there right up the gut, tag 2 of them, and they're pretty much screwed now. Their HP is essentially gone. One thing I've heard a lot of Espers complain about on the WildStar forums is the difficulty of landing mind burst in PvP. And here's the reality: the tier 8 ability is so good, you really need to learn how to use it well by endgame. And in my opinion, you won't get meaningfully good at aiming from just practicing in PvE. In PvE, mobs are stupid, they run straight at you, or they turret from a given spot and just fire from there. Mobs don't move dynamically and intelligently the way players do. So, in my opinion, if you want to get good at aiming, meaningfully good, the best way to do it is via PvP. Just queue up with some battlegrounds, and if it's helpful, queue up with friends to make it more fun. I do use PvE to practice key binding, but as far as aiming, that's really, I'm getting my repetitions from PvP. We're in a 2 versus 4 situation here initially, so I have to be careful not to overextend. Thankfully, a third friendly player comes over, and one thing you'll notice here, I'm built up to 5 combo points. I tagged that player for about 3,800 damage, which is nice on a crit. It's huge burst, which is really good for finishing opponents. And when you watch the mind burst mechanic, what I've noticed is that if you're on level ground, as long as the animation of the wings will hit your target, then generally speaking, you'll do damage to them. Right there is a great opportunity for Mind Burst. I tagged 3 opponents and then knocked a player down. I have to be careful though, I'm in a 1 versus 2 here. I go ahead and line up another 5-point Mind Burst since those targets are parallel. And you know, one of the fun things about playing the nuking aspect of the Esper is getting those targets lined up so you can hit multiple targets with your telekinetic strike, and then especially with your Mind Burst. You know, whenever possible, try to get into combat as soon as possible. One of the oddities of the class, you can't activate the innate ability until you're in combat. And so right here, since I've got 4 combo points and the player's health is low, I go ahead and hit my birdie, my Mind Burst. It's enough to drop the target. So in some cases, I'll go ahead and use Mind Burst at 4 combo points or even 3. Generally speaking, it's better to wait till 5, but if you know your target's low enough, sometimes I'll just go ahead and use it, and then wow, that guy he must have eaten a 4K Mind Burst from another friendly player. Here's something which is pretty interesting. I get tethered and I start to DPS on the tether. The tether has about 3k HP, which is so much that I can't even kill it before it despawns. I didn't realize they would have that much HP. I guess in the future, if I get tethered, I'll just sit there and DPS on a enemy target, or if it's a melee trying to beat up on me, I'll just simply use Psychic Frenzy and strafe around to the extent I can with the tether. But I was actually surprised it has that much HP. Obviously in this game, the counter CC mechanics are very interesting. You can slot CC breakers, and then when you're stunned, obviously you can hit the directional key. You can hold it to break out. I actually like the mechanic. It rewards your awareness and your time to react. Gives you something to do, whereas in a lot of cases sometimes you get chain CC and you really can't do anything about it in other games. So I like what WildStar has done. In a lot of ways their combat, actually I would argue it's probably the best combat system I've played in any MMO. Everything's a skill shot. You can counter CC. It requires a lot of attention on the part of the player. And what's really interesting to me, the last 2 or 3 years, games have moved away from the model of having 30 plus abilities per class, where the complexity is managing the rotations, to going to much more of a limited skill set. In the case of WildStar, 8 abilities plus your innate, but then making sure to aim and manage those cooldowns and those abilities well. So the class, I would say the Esper seems like it has a lot of flexibility. It was interesting. I had no intention of rolling an Esper at launch. I played beta for a total of about 5 hours, and then I was going to play a warrior originally as my main. I leveled him on live to level 11 because I wanted to try a melee and have the ability to tank in PvE if I wanted to. But then I tried a SpellSlinger, rolled him to 11 to see what all the hype was about, and it is a fantastic class, very mobile, good on-demand burst, front-loaded burst. But then I was reading on the Esper forums. There's so many complaints about Esper. I wanted to kind of see for myself how the class worked, and I was also very intrigued about the lifesteal mechanics. And it turns out the Esper is a lot of fun. Granted, you have to manage the stationary nature of it a bit, but you can see as in a battleground like this, it's pretty effective. I managed to tie for top damage at 292,000 and get second on kills with 6. Both teams had some decent healing sustained. Like the other side actually had 3 healers over 100k. We simply just overwhelmed them in terms of damage. We had like twice their damage but only half their healing, but that was enough. So I think the next video that I'll probably do is looking a little bit more at those lifesteal mechanics for the Esper. So when I get in the mid to upper 20s, I'll probably make another video. So let me know your questions and feedback. Take care.